Hi everyone, time for your Week 9 overview in English 101. Okay, we are right in the middle of this research project, so here's what you need to do this week. We have a reading and perusal that I think you will really enjoy. I like it a lot. It's called Annoying Ways People Use Sources, and it is a little silly, a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's got great information on very specific ways that you can or that you should avoid integrating your sources into your paper. So remember, last week we talked about the 3 ways that you can use information: quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing, but this goes just a little bit farther. It talks about attributing the information to a specific author, all kinds of good stuff. So be sure and read that by Wednesday. And then you have chapter 9 in your textbook, which talks about the stage that we're in, which is gathering your information and figuring out what you're going to do with it. By the end of the week, please post your responses to lesson 3.3. There's 2 parts to it. I'll talk about that in a sec. And then, of course, you're going to continue to work on your research paper, your draft. And just a heads up about 2 things that are coming up. Okay, not next week because that's spring break. But the week after that, your annotated bibliography will be due on Wednesday. That would be March 23rd. And the rough draft of your research paper will be due the Sunday of that week. So, roughly about 2 weeks from the time that you're listening to this. That would be March 27th. This textbook is devoted to 3 main ideas: invention, planning, and drafting. So I wanted to go over all 3 of those individually, just to kind of give you a heads up about what they entail. So invention, I know that sounds like, Rick and Morty blowing up the garage for the 1000th time, but we're really talking about gathering these ideas. And so this goes all the way back to the Roman rhetoricians, obviously Latin inventio, invention meaning to discover or to explore. And so this is actually the fun part of researching. It's when you're gathering all of these ideas and using some really fun, enjoyable tools to help make sense of them. And so these are where those pre-writing strategies come in, like clustering or brainstorming or free writing. Now, even though those look like, I don't know, maybe something that you did, in middle school or high school, trust me, these are tools that you will use the rest of your life. So find the one that really fits with you, whether you're a more visual learner or whether you're what's called a kinesthetic learner, where you like to move things around, pick things up, put them down. Find a strategy that really works for you and then stick with it, perfect it, and you will be such a better researcher, learner, and writer. And part of that then is what we call the journalists' or reporters' questions. When you're really digging into this topic, the who, what, when, where, why, really ask your source, interrogate your source with those questions to pull out kind of the meat of the article or the evidence that you can use. So this is the time to be messy. You can have papers laying all over with all these ideas, moving stuff around, because that's when the real genius arises. And then out of that begins to come a plan. And it's not something you usually have to, stress and strain over. It's something that just sort of rises spontaneously as you begin to gather these ideas. You will begin to see patterns. You will begin to see things that kind of match or fit together from different sources. Remember, this is a conversation, so maybe one part of the conversation is from one source, but then you find a different part of the conversation from another source. So you begin to fit these together. You could also think of this as kind of like a big jigsaw puzzle where the pieces are beginning to fall into place. So your textbook points out some good strategies for getting started. This is where you begin to put together a working thesis. And I have highlighted that because I want to emphasize the word working. Your thesis is like your blueprint or your plans, if you were building a house. It would be very specific. It has the measurements, the arrangements. Your thesis does the same thing. It points the way into your topic. But as you research and gather information, you may find that you need to shift your focus a little bit. And so your thesis will evolve and change somewhat. All right, so remember that the thesis, it's not chiseled in stone anywhere. You're free to let it evolve as your research evolves. There's also a great diagram or a list of questions on page 266 to help you formulate that working thesis with your topic. Okay, and then you have to come up with a plan. You can use a lot of those same strategies like the brainstorming or the clustering, but what is your paper going to look like? Back in the good old days, we were always required to create an outline, Roman numeral 1, and that's not something you need to do, but you kind of need to do some version of that works for you. So what's the first main point that you're going to introduce? What evidence is beginning to arise that then answers or fits in with point number 1, and so on. So you begin to get a sense of what this paper is going to look like. And then eventually you have to get started on the paper. And this is where a lot of people really drag their feet. And trust me, we all suffer from procrastination or writer's block at some point. So don't feel like it's some character flaw. It's just something that you have to learn to work with, Your textbook actually has some good guidelines. But here's my personal strategy. I try to trick myself, and I just tell myself, look, you only have to work for 10 minutes. I even set a timer. I said, just 10 minutes. That's all you have to do. Open your computer or pull out a sheet of paper and just work for 10 minutes. And occasionally the timer goes off and it's like, oh, okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. But more often than not, I just turn off the timer because now I've created some momentum. Now I've kind of gotten interested in what I'm doing, or at least I want to finish, the section that I'm on and get going. So I almost always end up doing a lot more than I bargained for when I started out. So that might be something that you try. So another thing to do would be to refer to your thesis. Okay, what part of your thesis can you start working on? You begin to see that this is why I really urged you to find a topic that you're personally interested in, so that your interest, your curiosity can kind of propel you throughout this whole process. Before you start a day's work, okay, so let's say, you've done a little bit, now the next day you're sitting down and you're going to continue, always go back and review what you did the day before. Not that I'm asking you to heavily revise it or anything, but just remind yourself, what train of thought were you on? What line of inquiry were you endeavoring to do? And here are 2 ways that you can further develop the ideas that you've got going. This is not in your book. This is just something that I've read about in the past. Think about developing your ideas vertically or horizontally, and these are just metaphors. When you develop an idea vertically, you keep the same idea, the same concept or same topic or subtopic, but you just expand on it. Okay, you add more detail, you maybe find more evidence to support that particular topic, right? Okay, vertical development. Horizontal development means to actually add more topics, more subtopics, to expand sort of the breadth of your argument. All right, so vertical development, really, that happens kind of more on the paragraph level, where you're rounding out your idea, filling it in. The horizontal development happens more on the scale of a whole section or an entire paper, where you may need to add another perspective or another voice or another source into this conversation to really, like I say, kind of round it out. So just keep those in the back of your mind. By Sunday, please do discussion 3.3. There's no peer response. Okay, this is just you. But you might want to take a look at what other people have posted after you've posted your own. So part 1 asks you to think about those invention strategies, the clustering, the brainstorming, the free writing. Choose one that you've never done before, one that maybe looks a little intriguing, and just test it out. Take it for a test drive, maybe work on it like one day and see what you think. And then I'd like you to write a good analysis, several sentences about how that worked out for you. Maybe it's something that you want to continue to use, or maybe it just did not work at all. Anyway, so give us a little bit of a reflection on that. After you've done that, and this is really the meat of this part 1, create a plan for drafting and revising, drafting and revision. How do you plan to write this research project? Now this could be the plan for what the paper looks like. It could also incorporate your plan for how to get this done. So there's a couple of different ways you can tackle this. But what is your plan to make sure this paper gets in on time and in a form that you're very satisfied with? Part 2 is talking about sources. So after you've read that article in perusal, I would like you to describe 2 of the many strategies or ideas that were presented in that paper, and just what do you think about them? How do you think you might be able to use them in this paper and then in subsequent academic assignments down the road? Okay, so that needs to be in by Sunday. All right, so that's all I have for you this week. You've got a full plate of tasks and readings, and remember to continue to gather sources. Remember that annotated bibliography is going to be due in about a week and a half, and that the minimum is 4 sources. You may certainly have more if you choose to, and so keep working on those. I'll be on chat on Monday between 11 and 12. If you want a quick response from me, you can always post questions in the Ask the Instructor discussion forum or contact me through the inbox in Canvas. And please contact me if you are confused about any aspect of the assignment before you do it. Don't waste your time trying to blunder through it and then find out that you really, were kind of way off base. So check in with me and make sure everything is really clear for you before you devote a lot of time to it. All right, have a great week. I'm really looking forward to reading these papers. You have some fantastic topics that you're working with. So good luck, and I will talk to you later.